This is Momo, my dog. There he goes, he's breathing on me. But welcome back. I got a lot of questions about, where I am currently, whether I got a job in UX or not. And I'm here to tell you that I have a job as a UX researcher. I now work at a tech company and I have been working there since June of 2022. So super, super exciting. And it's honestly really worth it. So I figured I'd make you guys a video talking about, my job application process, what I did to get my job, what my job is currently, and how it applies to being a BCBA and how much I really like it. So I hope you enjoy. Okay, so Momo decides that this is time to play, so he will be running in and out of the frames. But, so first things first, what did I do? What was my job process like? So basically, I went through a UX UI bootcamp, Avocademy. I have more information in a different video, basically reviewing it, and it was super helpful because in their career jumpstart, they have a lot of career help and stuff like that, and they have kind of strict guides as to how many jobs to apply to, what kind of jobs, etc. So in a 2-month span, I applied to about 500 different jobs. And I was applying to jobs every single day, like LinkedIn, Built in NYC, Glassdoor, Indeed, anything you could think of. And I was applying to different jobs: product designer, UX designer, UX researcher. I definitely didn't do UI designer because I'm not good at UI. So I applied to a different multitude of jobs and I did a lot of interview prep for them, and I was able to successfully get a couple of interviews through my portfolio and through my resume as well. So that lasted about 2 months. It was pretty intense. I was having about 3 to 6 interviews a week, I would say. But I only had one offer, which is at my current company now, which I absolutely love. So that was great. Okay, so now how did I get my job? So obviously I applied for a UX researcher role at my company, and they reached out and we had an interview, which was really awesome. And what I really did was I really piggybacked off my BCBA experience. So in a lot of boot camps, you won't necessarily get a lot of UXR experience in teaching with it. A lot of it's just overall UX UI. So UXR is taught, but very minimally, so you don't get a full exposure to all the different types of methodologies. So during my interview, I really focused on my skill set as a BCBA, my ability to empathize, my ability to see other people's perspectives, my ability to anticipate parents' needs, stakeholder needs, anticipate child's needs, right? Being able to understand the nuances in behavior that could then, the unspoken body language and things like that. And things also really uncovering what was going on. That was one of my big selling points. I really love being able to understand what is going on in its true entirety. Because if you think about it, right, we could have a parent saying hey, our kid's doing something X, Y, and Z at home. We ask them why, and it's not really clear. Or we have a behavior tech report something and they're not reporting it accurately enough. So as a BCBA, you have to go in and you have to go and really snoop around and see what is the whole story. And then you find that one variable and you're like, oh, that's why he's upset, or that's why she's throwing a fit, right? Maybe they just weren't eating at when they were hungry. Or they were upset because they need to have a bowel movement, et cetera, et cetera. So it's finding that little nitty gritty stuff. That's kind of what I translated within my interview to be those are the things that I love finding out. One of my quotes was, my biggest fear is not asking the right questions to find the right answers. And that's ultimately what we do, right? As BCBAs and as ABA professionals, we're looking for an answer, and we can always find an answer, but it depends on what the question is. So even though UX is not as analytical, not as technical, not as scientific as ABA, the overall needs and want to figure out and understand behavior is there, and it's really important to really make that connection between the two. Okay, so now for the fun stuff. What do I actually do? So I'm a UX researcher at a technology company. I'm on a team of 2 other UX researchers and my manager, And it's a relatively new team, so what we're doing right now is we're trying to really, one, identify good research opportunities for designers. Two, show the value of UX research to the whole company, so developers, engineers, etc. And three, conducting UX research. So there's different types of UX research methodologies that we do, but mainly from what I've experienced, most companies really stick with usability testing and interviews. And usability testings and interviews are things that BCBAs are great at because we always are interviewing. We're always talking to parents, and we're always talking to like speech pathologists, OTs, PTs, clients themselves, BTs, like behavior therapists, like all the time. And we're really good at being objective, and we're really good at writing questions and being mindful of our language. So that when we write questions, it's one, not biased, two, not leading, and three, it gets the results that we want. So I've been doing a lot of interviews to figure out, how do you like this feature? What do you think about this? How do you use that, etc. And I would say that it's been really fun doing that because I've been picking other people's brains, and I feel like I've been so used to picking people on the spectrum's brains that it's kind of a refreshing thing to pick different users. But you also get to see the different types of people that are out there too, right? Because sometimes the participants that are needed need to be very varied. So it's been fun, like getting to know different walks of life, you could say. Then there's things like usability testing, which we're also good at, so just to see how people use it. And then during those tests, I'm looking at their behaviors, I'm looking at how they're thinking, and then I'm translating it as a result as like, hey, this didn't work out because we're not following their mental model, or hey, it did work out, keep doing what you're doing, things like that. So that kind of relates to being a BCBA in a sense where we're just watching what is the easiest for them. So like how in ABA we look to see how does a client learn, what is the easiest way for them to understand, etc. It's kind of the same way with our user. Like how does a user use the product? Maybe we designed it one way, but the user's using it completely different. What is the best way to bridge that gap, etc., etc. Overall, I don't really use too much hard ABA skills. Like I'm not using reinforcement, I'm not using punishment, I'm not using functions of behavior during work. What I'm really using is the soft skills that I've learned and refined as a professional. And honestly, I can really say that I really love what I do. I feel like there has been so much pressure just lifted off of my shoulders, as well as just a better work-life balance. I work remotely. I do co-work though, so I do go somewhere else to work, and then I come home like in the middle of the day for my own personal reasons, and I feel like it's been amazing, and I feel like my quality of life has just increased immensely. I don't go to sleep with dread and fear of the next day, and I feel really stable and comfortable in my position. In my old position, I really felt like I could lose my job any second, or I would have to pay the money back to the company any second. So I really love that I have a lot of stability and foundation. Not to mention that the mentorship is so much better in this field because I'm also coming in not as a supervisor anymore. I'm coming in as like mid-level. So there is someone I can still report to and talk to. And what I really like is I have one-on-ones every week, whereas with ABA, it was like you just come and talk to your boss whenever you need something. You know what I mean? And so if you don't have a good boss, you're kind of stuck and you're scared to ask questions and you make mistakes and things like that. And I also think that one of the things that I kind of missed, but probably the biggest thing that I got from ABA is being super precise in my definition of behavior. So making sure that the things that I'm working on are definitely observable, definable, and measurable. So you will find that a lot of people in tech or just in design don't really have like concrete definitions, and I'm really good at going in and being like, okay, so if I write it like this encompasses everything that you're saying, because what you're saying right now makes no sense. It's way too vague, and we need it to be observable, definable, and measurable, and objective. So I think that has been one of the biggest thing that I've been pulling from my BCBA background, which is, a pretty big deal, because then it really puts your plan and your research on a very targeted path, and to make sure you get the result that you want, and there's no miscommunication between you and the designers or you and the PMs, right? It's very geared, and it's very focused, which is awesome. So ultimately, I really recommend, if you are looking to get into the tech field with an ABA background, to really check out UXR. I think it's one of the fields that has the most transferable skills, because I'm telling you, my interview was really me showing off my skill set as a BCBA in terms of how I could use it as a UX researcher. And I think that even though I'm very familiar with the different methodologies and how they're run, how to run the actual study is not an issue, right? Like, you could teach anyone that. It's actually being able to analyze that information that is the most important thing. And as a BCBA, I think that you were very well equipped to analyze qualitative data like that, because we do it constantly. And it's a very hard skill to teach people who just don't get it. And I think that's a major selling point for BCBAs trying to switch into UXR. And that's what I highly recommend, in my opinion. So definitely check out a UX researcher position, see if you can get an interview or something, internship or things like that, to see if it really fits you if you're interested in switching. But it was a pretty seamless transition for me, honestly. The biggest switch is probably getting used to corporate life, but I really enjoy this work-life balance so much more. Increased pay is a big bonus as well, and I'm just overall so much happier with my life, and I feel like I've just gotten into a much better spot because of this career change. My stress is infinitely less compared to being a BCBA, and I feel like I still am using the skills and doing what I love, which is analyzing behavior. I think that if you want to be a UXR, you can definitely do your own research portfolio. There are definitely things and guides online that show you how to do it, but I also recommend looking into a boot camp, because then a boot camp also widens your options to UX design. So you could do UX design or UX research. After getting this role, I really realized I'm not for UX design, I'm more for UX research. But at least I have that option, because now that I have that certification, if I ever wanted to switch over, I could. And and I'm familiar enough with the tools, and I'm familiar enough with the concepts that I could keep practicing my UX design skills while doing UX research. And it's also helpful because when the design team is presenting, I can give in feedback because I understand what's going on. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and good luck on your journey.